A show about growing some of your own delicious, healthy food coming up next. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to the show. Today we're all about edibles that are very delicious and easy to grow. And what better place to do that than from right here in the vegetable garden at Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's home. Now we'll get to this garden a little later in the show. Also in today's show, I'll show you how to assemble this spectacular hanging basket. Plus I'll show you a fun way to plant a variety of mints in a range of flavors in colorful containers. And how about a few tips on growing blackberries? Then we'll head to Chicago to visit a friend of mine as she gives us a tour of her fabulous garden. And don't forget, we'll make a delicious recipe together. Well, as you can see, we've got a lot to cover in today's show. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about Thomas Jefferson and Monticello, so stay tuned. Peter Hatch is the Director of Grounds and Gardens at Monticello, and he gives us a tour of this impressive orchard. Peter, the view of the orchard from up here on the vegetable terrace is really spectacular today here at Monticello.
Well, I think this was really a consciously designed perch for Jefferson. Even the garden pavilion, what was sometimes called the garden temple at the halfway point of the garden, was referred to as an observatory by a couple of people who came to Monticello. So this was obviously a place designed by Jefferson to look out upon what he called the workhouse of nature. Jefferson said, how sublime to look down upon the workhouse of nature, clouds, thunder, lightning, all fabricated at our feet.
Now correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but the orchard really was one of Jefferson's first expressions on the landscape here at Monticello.
Right, he began planting his orchard 2 years before he began building the house at Monticello. Not an unusual thing. Fruit growing in early America really meant horticulture in the sense there was much more energy devoted to the growing of apples and peaches and grapes than any other form of gardening. Most nurseries sold only fruit trees, and most of the instruction about growing things focused on how to grow fruit.
It had an obvious practical application.
Right. One historian has made the sort of tongue-in-cheek, though true remark that it was a really significant event when Americans began eating the fruit rather than drinking it.
He really spent his life adding new varieties of fruit trees. I mean, I know some of them would die and he would just have to replace them, but that was sort of an ongoing pursuit, wasn't it?
Right. It was a revolutionary orchard in the sense that Jefferson documented planting 170 varieties of the fanciest fruits that were known at the time, 37 varieties of peach and 18 varieties of apple. So it was a great collection for Jefferson, which he could taste these things and he'd make these sweeping proclamations about how this was the finest apple he'd ever tasted or the greatest fig he'd ever known.
Well, there's some wonderful varieties that I'm attempting to grow at my own farm, like Cox's Orange Pippin and Esopha Spitzenberg. Some of those varieties I assume he grew here.
Those are great, some of the great apples of the 18th and 19th century. One of Jefferson's favorite eating apples was the Newtown or Albemarle Pippin. And there was a great industry that evolved in this county based on the exportation of that apple to England.
Now figs were a big part of the garden, or I guess the orchard or fruit production here at Monticello as well, weren't they?
Yeah, one of Jefferson's friends remarked about how Jefferson retired to Monticello beneath his vine and fig tree.
And one of my favorite old varieties of figs is brown turkey, which I grow.
Well, that's great because of its fruity flavor. I love it. We also grow Marseille and another variety that Jefferson brought back from Paris called Angelica.
Now, having figs or fresh fruit at the table was really something that the upper classes, both here in England and Europe, it was something that you experienced when you dined.
Oh, certainly. It was an affirmation and confirmation of one's place in the world. But I'd say for Jefferson it was partly experimental. He wrote one time that if he failed 99 times out of 100, and sometimes it seemed like he did, that one success was worth all that effort. He was a great experimenter, and he really believed that the greatest service which could be rendered any country was to add a useful plant to its culture.
After the break, I'll show you how to make this simple herb hanging basket. And a little later, we'll visit my friend in Chicago, so stay tuned. Not everyone has a backyard to create an herb garden so they can cut fresh herbs and use in their cooking. You see, using a hanging basket can be a great way to utilize a small space or no space at all. Since many herbs enjoy similar growing conditions, they can be easily grown combined in one container. Here I've taken a wire hanging basket and added a cocoa liner. The cocoa liner is essential for retaining soil and providing adequate drainage. Then I filled the basket with soil made for vegetable and herb gardening. I used Bonnie plants because they're available in 100% biodegradable peat pots, which I can plant in the basket. Plus I can rely on Bonnie for healthy plants. I used parsley, thyme, sage, and oregano. After the plants were snug in their spaces, I filled it in with a little extra soil and watered them in well. Now you'll want to make sure that you place your hanging basket in a location that receives plenty of sun. It's at least 6 hours of sunlight a day. And you'll have fresh herbs at your fingertips all season long. Give it a try. I recently made a trip to Chicago where I met up with a friend of mine, Shauna Coronado. She gave me a tour of her very interesting garden. Shauna, this is quite extraordinary. Where did the inspiration come to create this beautiful paradise in the front yard?
I wanted to feed the hungry. I wanted to do something good for my community, so I had to build a garden.
Yeah, well, I see all the vegetables and herbs integrated among so many beautiful ornamentals, flowers of all kinds.
Well, I think that mixing and matching is really the key here, because when you mix and match the vegetables and, ornamental perennials, then what you're really seeing is it looks like a beautiful florific garden instead of just a big old vegetable patch that has straight rows.
How much do you harvest from the vegetable and herb crop here in your front garden?
Well, last year over 100 pounds. So it's really a micro farm, if you will. It's very small, but it does a lot. We have a local food pantry, and I donate all the food that we don't consume to that local food pantry, and it's delicious.
Well, it's quite a horticultural oasis here amongst all this lawn. I love the way that you've decorated the walls with art.
It's art, but it's living art. Behind me, you see a pallet garden, and we built the pallet garden all from leftover material, including the plants.
Yeah.
The plants were not working in pots that I had, so we pulled them out and repotted them in this.
And look at your potager. You have these 4 beds. I love the symmetry of it. And you're growing lovely vegetables here in the shade.
In the shade, that's the trick. So many people think you can't grow vegetables in the shade, but look, it's happening right here. We have kale, beets, even
celery,
society garlic. Everything's here.
Look at the basil.
And they're planted in beds that are really recycled post-consumer plastic. So I love the idea of reusing, recycling whenever you can, and then growing vegetables in the shade. Everyone has some shade. You got to do it.
Sure. Well, with as intense as the sun can become during the summer, the vegetables really like a little relief from it.
They do. And lettuces grow great in shade, the Swiss chard.
All your leafy things.
Everything leafy.
It's really beautiful, and you've added splashes of color with the coleus, which is nice. This is a great example of another vertical garden.
Blue.
Look at the color.
I love the blue, and here's why I put it up here. I wanted a wall of color that was sustainable. I could plant vegetables in it, and I didn't want to overfill it so that all you saw were plants. I love the color.
Sure, I love it. You've got radishes, you've got chard. Look at the stalks of that chard.
Oh, so tall.
It resonates with all the other reds here. I think it's fantastic.
It's planted with all organic soil, and it's been doing marvelously. That's a little touch of heaven. I love the wall.
Well, I just love your creative expression, and particularly what you've done throughout this garden on these vertical, often underutilized spaces. Now, after this quick break, I want to show you this fun way to plant a flavored mint container. And a little later, answer a few questions about blackberries, so don't go away. Are you one of those people who say, I can't grow anything, I have a brown thumb? Well, if you are, I've got the plant just for you. It's mint. There are so many wonderful reasons to grow mint. Well, first, it's very aromatic, tastes delicious, and it's easy to grow. And guess what? Bonnie Plants produces so many varieties, you just can't believe it. One of my personal favorites is apple mint. I like its fuzzy foliage. You see, it makes a nice addition to flower arrangements. And like other mints, apple mint releases its flavor by simply bruising the stems and leaves. You can also toss these bruised leaves and stems into ice water for a quenching summer drink, or steep them in hot water for tea. For those with a sweet tooth, there's this one called chocolate mint. Just look at the dark stems. It's a striking plant. It also has a strong minty aroma with a faint hint of chocolate. On the other hand, orange mint reminds me of candied orange peel, blending a sweet citrus taste with lavender tones. And as I said, mint is easy to grow. All you really need is full sun. They'll even take partial sun. You want well-drained soil, and you don't even have to really fertilize mint too much. In fact, fertilizing it causes it to grow too rapidly, so lay off the fertilization and harvest it very often. Now, one downside to mint is that it can be a thug. I mean, if you plant it out in the garden, it's going to take over. It grows very rapidly. That's why I recommend that you plant mint in containers and place those containers near your kitchen or where you're going to use the mint. Also, I think it can be kind of fun to paint the containers the different colors of the types of mint. For instance, here with the apple mint, I painted this pale red, the chocolate mint brown, the orange mint, of course, orange. And over here I have lemon balm, which is also a form of mint, in a yellow container. It's just an idea. Give it a try. I've received several emails from viewers seeking advice on growing blackberries, and believe it or not, blackberries are one of the most carefree berries you can grow. And if you're worried about them having thorns, well, some varieties do, but there are actually some thornless varieties. You see, they'll tolerate just about any soil, and they're relatively disease and pest-free, although some viruses are one common problem to watch out for. To avoid this, purchase certified virus-free plants from a nursery rather than succumbing to the temptation of transplanting wild vines or pass along seedlings from a generous friend or a neighbor. The best time to plant blackberries if they're bare root is in the very early spring or late winter, although gardeners who live in warm climates can also plant them in the fall and the winter. If these plants are being grown in containers and have soil around them, you can plant them any time of the year. Now, you want to choose a location that receives plenty of sun and where you can provide support for the canes because they'll grow quite long. Now, you're going to find blackberries need about 1 to 2 inches of water a week and should be fertilized in the spring with an all-purpose blend. Now, don't be disappointed if you don't see much fruit the first year because it usually takes 2 years for young plants to produce. Now, once you've harvested berries from a certain cane, it's important to cut that cane back all the way to the ground because it's not going to produce any fruit again. Pruning will direct the plant's energy toward producing new growth, new canes, which will bear fruit the following year. Of course, the big reward with blackberries is when it's time to pick the fruit. And the fruit should be harvested about every 2 to 3 days. And if you collect them in the early morning, they seem to last longer. You'll find that they'll keep in the refrigerator for about a week. And if I have extra, I always freeze them. I hope this helps. And if you need more information, just check out my website, pallensmith.com. After the break, we'll meet in the kitchen and we'll go to work on this delicious recipe, so stay right where you are. You know, fresh arugula is one of my favorite salad greens. It is so peppery. It's got such a great flavor to it. And what I like to do is create simple salads, and that's what I'm going to do here. This is an arugula, roasted beet, and goat cheese salad. But the real unsung star here is the salad dressing. You're going to love it, particularly if you like orange, because what I do is an orange reduction. So what we're going to do first is get started on the salad dressing. Okay, so let me show you what I do. It's really simple. You just take a cup and a half of orange juice like this, and you want to reduce it down to 1/3 cup, and that's what you start with. So I'm going to pour this in. And then what I'm going to do is take some shallots. I have 1 shallot, and it's finely chopped. And then 2 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar. Beautiful colors. And then a teaspoon of fresh thyme, which we just grow right outside the kitchen door here. Now I'm going to add some olive oil, and I have 2/3 of a cup here. And what I'm going to do is add it slowly and whisk as I pour the olive oil in here. It just takes a few minutes to really work all this olive oil together with the other ingredients. And now I'm just going to add a little salt and pepper. Here's the pepper and just a little bit of salt to it. And with that, I'm ready to pop it in the fridge. So you just want to leave the dressing in the refrigerator until you're ready to serve, and I am. And I'm going to show you what I'm going to do here. I'm going to take these beets, and I love beets. A lot of people have an attitude about beets. And I like to slice a few like this. And what I like to do is dress them with just a little bit of olive oil. So it takes about a dozen beets. I roasted these at 350 for about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. They're really beautiful. And then I'm going to add a little salt and pepper to go on them. You could slice all of them at once. And then I'm just going to plate up one of these so you can see how it looks. But first, what I want to do is take a little bit of the dressing. Take half the dressing and pour it on the arugula. I'm doing here, sort of tossed together. Really doesn't take a lot of arugula. I think this only calls for about a couple of cups. And I grow a lot of arugula here at the farm. It's a cool weather plant called rocket, and it's a great winter crop here because in zone 7 our winters aren't that harsh, and so I can keep it in the garden, and particularly if I cover it with a frost blanket or something like that. Okay, so now I have the arugula on the plate, and I'm just going to add some of these beets. And here's where you can get sort of artistic. And this will make beet lovers out of people if you lay them on here beautifully, and then with this flavor it'll really send them over the top. So I've got a few beets here, and then what I like to do is add the goat cheese crumbles, and then top it off with some of these toasted hazelnuts. And again, I go back to just a little pinch of salt and plenty of pepper. And then what you do with the rest of that dressing is you can drizzle it over the top. You can add it to the beets like this. It's really, really good. Wonderful salad. Give it a try. I hope you've enjoyed our show on edibles as much as I have. Sadly, we're out of time. But if you're interested in that mouth-watering recipe, you can find it on my website, pallensmith.com, along with all the other information in today's show. Until next time, from the garden, I'm Alan Smith.
In this garden I dream of a bed of flowers. Bluebirds sing of the beauty all around us. And every time the sun comes out, I can't help but smile. Oh, no, I can't help but smile.